That's not a good thing. It reminds me of, have any of you ever heard of the Sodder children?
Negative.
No. How do you spell that?
Sodder.
All right, pretty simple.
Well, it's a story that involves children and burning houses. So just on a lark, I'm going to tell you a story. The year, 1945. The town, Fayetteville, West Virginia. The day, Christmas Eve. The place, the home of George and Jeannie Sodder and their 9 children. They had 10, but one was off somewhere, but they had...
On Christmas Eve?
Yeah, he was, I think he was actually fighting in a war.
Oh, he was like an older one, okay.
Yeah. 1945, so a war seems like it could be happening.
Probably.
So, at 10 p.m., Jeannie and George were asleep, assuming their children were asleep as well. 2 had gone to sleep before them, 1 was sleeping with them, and the others were allowed to stay up a little late to play with new toys, being Christmas Eve and all. Then, at 12:30, the phone rang. Jeannie went downstairs and answered the phone. An unknown woman answered back and asked for an unfamiliar name. In the background was the sound of clinking glasses and laughter. When she told her that they had the wrong number, Jeannie recalls the woman had a weird laugh and hung up. She hung up and went to go to bed. She noticed that the lights were still on and the curtains were not drawn, a task the children usually completed before bed. But she noticed the eldest daughter, Marion, was asleep on the couch, so she assumed the other children were asleep and returned to bed. At 1 a.m., she was awoken again by the sound of something hitting the roof and rolling off.
Oh.
After hearing nothing else, she went back to sleep. Half an hour later, she awoke to the smell of smoke. She ran downstairs to find George's office on fire, generally around the telephone wire and fuse box area. She woke up George, who in turn woke up their older sons. The 2 parents and 4 of their children, Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr., escaped the house. The other children were upstairs in the attic. They yelled upstairs to the other children, but they couldn't get to them because the stairs were now engulfed in flames. They tried to call the fire department. Phone was dead. Jeannie ran next door to call and still couldn't reach them. Christmas Eve, small town, bad timing. They ran to grab the family ladder that was always on the side of the house. It was missing. George ran to start his 2 trucks to move them closer to the house and climb atop them. They wouldn't start. So the family were forced to watch helplessly as their home burnt to the ground over a 45-minute period with 5 of their children inside. Now, the fire department finally did show up the next morning.
What?
Because they had like a weird phone tag system where one person would call one person, that person would call. It was a volunteer fire department, and because it was Christmas Eve, it just the whole system
they
just
were just
failed.
drunk.
Basically, I'm sure.
Eggnog was just popping off.
This is fucking
Getting
sad.
a nog drunk is a mean drunk. That's a weird cream, egg. Yeah,
it's a creamy drunk.
It's a creamy drunk.
It's like a brunch drunk.
Brunch drunk. That's a good name for something. Brunch drunk love. Now, they searched the rubble of the home, but were unable to find any remains whatsoever. The chief, F.J. Morris, suggested it had been hot enough to burn the bones completely, and the search was ended. George was told not to disturb the location until the state fire marshal could inspect it. But after 4 days, he and his wife couldn't stand the sight of it, so they did what anyone would do, and they bulldozed 5 feet of dirt over the site to make a memorial. So they completely just ruined the site. It would be a crime scene by just putting 5 feet of dirt on it.
Oh, my God.
Later, an inquest determined the fire was due to faulty wiring. Even though...
How would they have figured that out if they bulldozed the entire fucking structure?
From the initial search, from the initial go through,
from
the evidence.
One dude, right?
From what Mr. Morris did.
All right.
A few months earlier, he had all the wiring in the house inspected, and everything was hunky dory. So, death certificates were issued for the 5 children, and life was supposed to move on. But the Sodders began to question what happened that night, and there were a lot of things to question about the days leading up to fire and the night itself.
Yeah, that phone call.
Yeah, that of course. A few months before, a stranger had come to the house looking for hauling work. While in the backyard with George, he pointed to a fuse box and said, "That's going to start a fire someday." But he had just, once again, he had the wiring checked, so he's like, that doesn't mean anything. Then, 2 months before the fire, a traveling salesman tried to sell life insurance to the couple. When George declined... Oh, they always look for you. When George declined, the salesman became furious and said, quote, "Your goddamn house is going to go up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed. You're going to be paid for those dirty remarks you've been making about Mussolini."
What?
Yeah, because you see, they were Italian immigrants.
Oh, my God. I didn't know that.
Back in
You
Italy.
buried the lead, man.
Oh, well, no, it's called a shocker. It's like a twist. It's a twist. You didn't see it coming. George was very, very outspoken about his dislike for the dictator Mussolini and would often get in heated debates with other Italians in town because Mussolini is a dictator.
How many
pretty much
Italians
a
are
crap
in Fayetteville, West Virginia in 1950,
Oh,
whatever the fuck?
no, true, yeah.
They always find different pockets. You'll find different pockets of different groups.
Those
any groups.
people.
Mainstream
Those
media.
particular people and then other different people. I'm being racist to everybody. No, just you'll always find groups of
That's fair.
line up in one area.
So he got cornered by the local
And so
Mussolini sympathizers.
it seems that way. Maybe he popped off a little bit too much to the wrong people.
Yeah.
Now, the older sons also recall seeing a man parked along the highway watching the younger children come home from school one day.
I hate stalking stories.
It's always just creepy. It's dark.
There's nothing you can do. You're always a fucking sitting duck. That's like the scariest story, I think.
More and more, the Sodders became convinced that their 5 children had been kidnapped and that the fire was arson, because so much just did not add up. If the fire was electrical, why were the Christmas lights still on when they escaped? When they still escaped, the power was still working. If it was an electrical fire, then there should be no power. They later found, after the fire, they found their missing ladder at the bottom of an embankment 75 feet away from the house. And a telephone repairman told them that the wire to the house didn't burn, it had been purposely cut. Someone had climbed up the ladder, cut off the line, and thrown the ladder away, apparently.
This could have been a lot of different people, though.
Could have been a team effort. So Jeannie Sodder wouldn't accept the fact that there were no remains in the rubble when she found several appliances from the kitchen intact from
Good
the
for
fire.
you, Jeannie.
Keep it up. Hold the faith. She conducted several experiments herself, burning animal bones, and was never able to turn them into ash. Just to calm her mind.
Is that one of the saddest things?
Yeah, just
bereaved mother, like burning like pig bones in a yard
Yeah.
somewhere, just like trying to make sure that. Oh God, that's terrible. Jesus Christ.
And she talked to a crematorium operator who told her that a 2-hour fire burning at 2,000 degrees would still leave bones intact. And this is a 45-hour-long fire. There's no way.
45-minute.
Yeah. And so a local bus driver also said that she had seen someone throwing, quote, balls of fire at the house on Christmas Eve.
What?
It was Sergeant Slaughter, and he said, "God damn it, Hulk Hogan," and he fucking threw a fireball at his face.
Brother.
Something hitting the roof when she's in the
Yeah,
middle
when
of
she
the
heard
night.
something hit the roof and roll off. And they found, once the snow had melted, they found a small dark green rubber ball near the house that resembled a pineapple bomb, which is a incendiary device.
Oh.
So that looked like that was another possibility.
Do you just light it and toss it?
Yep. Oh, yeah. It's not very, very small technology there, just light and goo. Now, on top of all this, there were multiple sightings of the children after the fire. People in town say they saw the kids in a vehicle on the night of the fire. A woman at a hotel claims to have seen the children a week after the fire. And so George and Jeannie erected a billboard near their home with pictures of the 5 children and announcing a $10,000 reward for their return. The Sodders also hired a private detective to look into the case. He found out that a man that sat on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire an accident was the insurance salesman that threatened George previously.
Come on.
Yeah, how did that sink through? How did that guy get the gig?
West Virginia.
And he found out
Almost heaven.
He also found out that the fire chief actually found a heart in the ashes that he kept, put in a metal box, and buried. They confronted him because he had confessed to a local priest. And so they confronted him. He confessed to them. They dug up the box, and they discovered that what was inside was not a human heart, but a beef liver. So he found on the scene a beef liver, kept it for himself, thinking it's a heart, and put it in a box and buried it.
That wasn't burnt.
None of it makes any sense. Yeah, it had never been exposed to fire.
This is stupid.
In 1967, Jeannie Sodder received a photo of a man that resembled Louis Sodder, one of their missing children. On the back, it said, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, ill boys, A90132 or 35. That's what it said. Doesn't make any sense. People have studied trying to think of its zip codes.
One more time.
Or anything.
What was it?
It says, Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, ill boys, ILIL boys, A90132 or 35. Whatever that means. The photo was
Ill
sent.
Ill
You
boys?
said ill boys?
I-L-I.
That just means the.
That means the boys?
The boys.
Yeah.
Oh, the boys. Okay.
The boys.
Ill
yeah.
boys would be,
Ill
but
boys.
it's Ill I-L-I-L.
I-L-I-L. I-L-I-L.
The boys.
Yeah, the boys.
The boys. The boys.
Unless ill means.
Now, the
something.
photo
So
was...
that might be some kind of clue then,
Yeah.
if they're doubling up something
I'm
else.
figuring this murder out right now.
There you go. And Angela solved it by the time I finished the story. She's good. She's good.
Look at her. She already has a desk and 2 assistants. Where the fuck are they coming
Oh
from?
my God, she has interns.
Get
this
out
is
of my
amazing.
house! Look at her.
She's on it.
She's
Well, I was
scribbling.
about that.
She's scribbling.
There's a lot. There's a lot of things that this means in many different languages. Anyway, I'm just going to
Anxious.
put papers everywhere.
Stop it.
Now, ooh,
What the fuck was?
Sorry.
knocking things over and
That's
shit.
me.
Now, the photo was sent from Kentucky, but without a return address. So they hired another private eye to track down the sender. The private eye left West Virginia and was never heard from again. He went off to find out what's up with this photo and disappeared. Gone. Never heard from again. Now, George and Jeannie continued their search for the rest of their lives. George passed away in 1969 and Jeannie in 1989. As of 2015, Sylvia was the only child left alive and still hopes that one day the mystery of her missing siblings will be solved.
Realistically, it sounds like a lot of means being put toward something that doesn't really seem worth the effort, right? Like West Virginia, a small town family. At some point, the country roads take you there. And then you got Mussolini sympathizers that have access to pineapple fire incendiary things and like a group of people to cut telephone lines and throw ladders
Well, it was
and
a type
cover
of,
up.
It was a type of bomb, I think.
It seems like a lot of
Pineapple bomb?
effort for
Yeah,
what?
it's
for
it's
sure.
just basically like a Molotov
And then
cocktail.
to
I have no idea.
to take children, and then also to then send pictures afterward, and to disappear other private investigators who.
But where are the bones? Why would they? That's the thing, is that where are the remains? I mean, there's no.
Where are the bones?
Yeah, and what's with the liver heart thing?
liver heart
The
thing
liver
is
heart is like it's like that, like some
like
people say
Captain
that
Beefheart.
he planted it there. Captain Beefheart's crazy. That he
do-
planted it there.
It's interesting stuff.
Are there theories that the police chief had anything to do with it? Because
That
always
he
do.
seems involved in some way. You know,
doesn't it seem like the stupidest crime ever?
It's
Like
very
with people
silly.
calling,
Right.
saying like,
Yeah.
"Oh, cheers to William." William's not here.
And
Good.
The house just gets fire and like crazy.
Were they watching like Showtime?
Why pick on Showtime?
It sounds Showtime-ian. The
you.
plot is very
Yeah,
Showtime-ian.
that's Showtime.
I would say more stars, but sure, I'll go Showtime.
Star Showtime.
I'm a stars thing. Something about the old people's, you know.
The Ron Howard
Yeah.
movie. Them,
Oh, well, so we're talking movie
Showtime?
stuff.
Is it Showtime or is it Stars?
Like how they
Yeah,
put them
Cocoon.
in the thing. They put them in the pool. And
Yeah.
they're cooned up.
yeah.
Cocoon sucked.